Have you ever wondered what we look like?
I wonder all the time.
It's kind of an odd question to ask, isn't it? But a lot of people that listen to this podcast have no idea what we look like. And years ago, like many years ago, like 10, I bet you over 15 years ago, I was listening to this podcast and I enjoyed the
Not
podcast.
this
Not this
podcast.
podcast, a podcast. And I enjoyed it, but I always thought the main guy sounded a bit like a jerk. And then I realized they had a video version of the podcast. So I watched an episode of that, and all of a sudden you could see him making these dry comments and then smirking. And the whole thing was a joke. Like he had such a dry sense of humor, it didn't come across in the podcast. And it changed the way I listened to the podcast. So this is a long way of saying we have toyed with the idea of doing video version of this podcast. So we are, and if you go to our website, thewhatcar.com, and you click on this episode, the story post for this episode, embedded in there will be about the cheapest and easiest way that you could do a video podcast. We do this via Zoom and we record everything, and then we just scoop out the guts of the audio and produce what most people will listen to. But we are also we've got video for almost every episode. And I was deleting some of them and I was like, oh, we should just put this up. So long story short, if you want to know whether or not we're jerks or whatever, or what we look like, or whether we both have beards, then you could go to thewhatcar.com slash I don't really know what slash nothing, and you can see us. Who
Or
are we?
youtube.com/the Watt Car, right? Is that a thing?
YouTube.com slash at the what car. So a little at ampersand.
Gotcha.
I'm Phil Royle. I set that stuff up so you could complain to me via hello at thewhatcar.com. If you don't, if you watch the episode and we're like, you guys should hide your faces, then email me at hello at thewhatcar.com. But I've been doing this in some form or fashion for 20 years. I used to put my picture in the front of the magazines on the masthead and in editorial columns, and nobody complained. Nobody said I broke anything with my face. So anyway, I've been doing content creation and journalism for like 20 years, and here I am also selling t-shirts. I put a new product up, thewhatcar.com/store. There is a new product because I needed a backpack for my kids. So I've now got on there, you can get the Watt Car Champion backpack. It's too late for back to school, but you know,
All
maybe
right.
for Christmas or whatever. It ain't the cheapest, but it's a good quality backpack. And I may put up other stuff. I find generally if I need something, I create a product and then I can put
So
this up our store.
is this our classic logo or the funky logo?
This is the funky one that embroiders mostly well.
Gotcha.
Set your expectations there. The embroidering is pretty good.
I don't know. I thought it's pretty good on our official uniform we wear to shows when we go.
Yep. Yep.
Ed Sanchez, likewise, 20 plus years in automotive content creation and moderation. Currently working as automotive electronics industry analyst and the Watt Car co-founder and contributor. And speaking of going to shows, I did not go to one that
Wow,
was
neither did I.
literally
Oh, but this
5
one,
minutes away from where I live. So
yeah, I had a good excuse. I'm like 6 hours away from where it was. You probably could hear the vehicles and
for the entire week, yeah, not EVs, obviously.
yeah, so this is Monterey Car Week.
Yeah.
You live hoity-toity because you know you're independently wealthy, trust fund
Oh yeah,
child.
exactly.
Live
So
in
yeah,
the highfalutin Monterey area.
so the highfalutin Monterey area, if you haven't been, is a pretty small, compact kind of area. So even though you have Carmel, Monterey, Pacific Grove, all these places that are technically their own city, they're all kind of clumped together. And I don't know if it's the topography or whatever, but when all these classic cars roll into town with their loud exhaust, you like hear it, it like the sound bounces off everywhere. So I'm guessing Ferraris, Porsches, who knows what, but I could hear the exhaust like burbling and popping all around me. But
Did you get out there and rev your Model 3?
I fired up ye old Buick wagon and took it out on Saturday, but by that time, the festivities had kind of wound down, by and large. So I cruised it around Monterey, down Alvarado Street, Cannery Row, and I actually ventured over to Carmel. And there were actually some kind of velvet rope events still going on, and I puttered past them in the Buick, and I actually got a few thumbs up and a few people commenting like, "Oh, yeah, it's a cool wagon." But
And you're like, what are you talking about? I'm just going to the store.
yeah. But I actually went out last year, but last year I went out kind of midweek, and it was a lot more kind of happening scene. Um, I guess I should have done that instead of going out, the day before everything kind of wound down. So anyway, that's on me. Not an EV, my Buick wagon. I wish it were, but it's not. But anyway,
But you parked
so
it next to an EV. It's EV adjacent.
well, it is EV adjacent in my garage. So anyway,
Did you run into a Navara while you were there?
no, but I guess my hunch was right. So you said like Rimac was doing the slow tease of this car they were going to show at Car Week, like little by little. They
It was
were
supposed to
revealing more of
be,
it.
yeah, they were revealing it by pixels on Instagram.
Uh-huh.
And it started off with 50,000 pixels to go. And last we looked at it, it was like 22,000 pixels, something like
Mm-hmm.
that, when the last episode aired. And they were saying that it was going to be revolutionary and raucous. I don't remember the other word. And so I was like, well, when they're using words like revolutionary, this is not going to be just a rehash of their existing car. And you were like, I don't know, it could be a rehash of their existing car. And guess which one of us was right? Guess what revolutionary actually means? It means 300
Rehash?
more horsepower, which is nothing to sneeze at,
No.
but it's hardly something that I would say stop the presses on. Other than, so this is the Rimac Navara R limited
Mm-hmm.
edition, 40 horsepower. No, sorry, 40 horsepower. That would be revolutionary. They're going
Yeah.
from 1800 horsepower to 40.
40.
Now they're only making 150 planned of the Navara. This is 40. I don't know if that's in addition to the 150. So now they're up to
190.
190 or whatever. I'm sure there's some other special edition that they've done. I don't know how that divvies up, or if they've been like, we're not selling the 150. Maybe we'll dial 40 of those to be these R edition.
Mm-hmm.
It is 2,107 horsepower. Sounds like a lot,
Not bad.
but the other version is 1,800 or 1,700 or nearly 1,900,
Only?
depending on what outlet you read. I
Uh-huh.
discovered when I was trying to confirm the number's all over the place. I think Rimac released a variety of horsepower numbers when
Mm-hmm.
originally announcing the Navara.
Mm-hmm.
So people are running with different numbers. But it's got a new unnamed battery chemistry, as far as this article that I found on Car and Driver.
Mm-hmm.
It's got 215 EPA miles, roughly, because they revealed the WLTP numbers, out of a 108 kilowatt hour lithium battery with,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, the unknown battery chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem very efficient to me. So,
But they claim it's going to be 10% more efficient, I guess.
yeah, it kind of went against the fact that they said it's 10% more efficient, and then they said 108 kilowatt hour battery, it does 215 miles, went completely in the face. It's like they wrote that announcement specifically because they heard me say, wouldn't it be great if they made something that was more efficient or as efficient as a Lucid Air? And they were like, oh, we'll see you here. Like, this is barely more efficient than an EV truck.
Yeah.
What
Yeah,
else?
but 2,000 horsepower. So,
Yeah, well, the color. I forget the name of the color. Did you read about the color?
No, but I saw it. It looked greenish.
It is inspired by the E30 that Mate Rimac's E30 original EV conversion was.
All
So
right.
that's why it's greenish. It's not the same E30 color because you probably get sued, but it's inspired by the green. And that's one of the
All
reasons
right.
I like Mate, and I like the way that he does a lot of this stuff, is because he seems to be an enthusiast who gets it.
Mm-hmm.
And here, though, I mean, he's an enthusiast that just said more power.
Mm-hmm.
and so it shall be. And that's fine. It's hardly revolutionary, I would say. And one of the reasons why it's hardly revolutionary is I was reading an article, I think this one was Road and Track, and it pointed out 0 to 60 on the Navara R,
Mm-hmm.
2,107 horsepower, 300 horsepower more than the standard
Mm-hmm.
Navara. 0 to 60 is the same because they cannot get more traction.
So it's
And
traction
that
limited.
it is traction limited to the point that it actually accelerates faster than it can brake. Back in the day,
Kind of like the Plaid.
well, back in the day, it's right around there. They always said that braking, if you put braking into horsepower numbers, it would take
Mm-hmm.
something like 2,000 horsepower to brake a vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
deaccelerate
Mm-hmm.
at the speed that it deaccelerates. And I was like, "Whoa, that's pretty crazy." Well, we're there.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
are there. And because the Navara has narrower front tires than rear tires, when it goes to accelerate and it does the weight shift back, it's got more contact patch in the
Mm-hmm.
back. And
Mm-hmm.
the front's kind of scrambling, but they can go through and they it's like a 100 hertz system. So 100 times a
Mm-hmm.
second, they are delivering, adjusting power to each
Mm-hmm.
through each motor. When you're braking, they can kind of do that a little bit with the regenerative braking. They can kind of dial
Mm-hmm.
stuff in, but the ABS can't work at that speed. Plus, the Navara has narrower front tires, so when you hit the brakes, you've actually got less contact patch because
Mm-hmm.
the rear lifts up
Mm-hmm.
and the nose dives down. You're putting more, trying to squish those front tires more, which are
Mm-hmm.
narrower. So they'd actually have to go to a square setup for the Navara to brake as powerfully as it
As hard as it
accelerates.
accelerates. Huh?
Yeah. But they're apparently in development for new tires for this car, for the R, because of this traction limitation. They
Mm-hmm.
can't go faster. It's something like 0 to 60 in 1.74 seconds, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying, we're capped out, dude.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well,
We're at the limit.
I mean, ultimately the limit is physics, and we're much closer to that than we were in even the heyday of internal combustion, which I don't know, depending on your perspective, is either now or a few years ago. I mean, EVs, um, whether you're talking about the Navara or the Plaid or the Lucid Air Sapphire, um, even the notion that a car could accelerate faster than it could brake just seemed ludicrous. No pun intended. Um, but that the fact that that's even a reality is kind of hard to fathom, because typically, I don't know precisely, but typically the brakes on even performance cars were effectively 3 times as powerful as the engine. I That's kind of anecdotal, but um, yeah, but that was the basic yardstick, and now we've reached the point, like you said, where they're accelerating faster than they brake, or about the same. In fact, I can't remember, but when this was before they offered like the carbon track pack for the Plaid, but the standard Plaid, I think they determined it accelerated faster than it could brake.
Yeah,
So
we're right there.
yeah,
And now you're getting to tire compound, tire width, like you are
sidewall
literally,
deformation.
yeah, you are literally at the the limitations of physics. It's no longer like back with the M5. I remember when I drove one of those, I think it was one of the V8 ones in the early
Mm-hmm.
2000s. And it it didn't have the ability to put the traction down, not
Mm-hmm.
because there was so much power, but just because the technology wasn't there with traction control, and
Mm-hmm.
your right foot isn't as good as it should be. Maybe Max Verstappen could do it, but I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't do it, where you could hold it on the edge of acceleration
Mm-hmm.
going forward. Now you could just mat it, to pun off of Mate Rematz's name, and it will just take care of it.
Yeah.
It'll just go. And so now it's a whole other
Yeah.
world.
So it sounds like Rimac might be getting into motorsports,
So it
maybe.
turns out I was also right. While I was wrong, I was also right.
Mm-hmm.
So Mate Rimac revealed in an interview with Motor One that they are, quote, he said, quote, so we are building a track car, a single seater that's going to be faster than any race car for most tracks, faster than Formula One, faster than Le Mans. And this is
Wow.
going to be dedicated track car, single seater. So not efficient at all. But I would say that that could be potentially revolutionary and everything that they
Hmm.
were saying for this Navara R, assuming some of that translates to the street. I'm a big
Hmm.
motorsports guy. That's how I work. My day job is in motorsports. I participate, I'm a racer. But at the same time, just making a track only car is like the
Hmm.
Ariel Atom. That's cool, I
Hmm.
guess. The Radicals, they're cool, I guess. But having something that can do both, especially now
Hmm.
that you don't have to meet emissions
Hmm.
on this stuff, and you can take a street car that does 0 to 60 in 1.7 seconds. Like, I don't know. I feel like we're at the point where you should be able to have a car that could do both. Where I'm curious is what can they do when all the constraints are lifted?
Yeah.
And Rimats, for being this engineering marvel,
Hmm.
we've not seen them with the gloves off.
Nope.
So, and you could argue, $2.5 to $3 million car. That's kind of the gloves are off, but you still got to meet crash tests. You still got to have
Yep.
airbags. You still got to have all these other. You got to have mirrors, or at least in Europe, like cameras. You got to do all this. With a race car, you could go, okay, we're going to do a rear camera, so you don't have to look at the back. So you got the screen. So you've got whatever. But you don't have to have airbags. You don't have to have some of these other systems that are in there. You still want crumple zones and things like that, but
Yeah, but I mean,
you can do it
but
a
to your
different way.
point though, in motorsports, there are still some basic requirements in
Mhm.
terms of safety systems, so forth, but
Yeah,
not as extensive as on a road car.
yeah, and this could be a $10 million track car.
Yeah.
Like we don't know.
Yeah.
So, so I was kind of right, but I was mostly wrong.
Yeah. Well, you brought something up. I hope it's not going to be $10 million. I'm guessing it'll probably be a little less than that. And you've actually driven this car's immediate predecessor, I think.
Yeah, the most recent well, I don't even know if it's yes, I guess the Acura NSX
Yeah,
is a hybrid,
the
and
most recent one, not the OG one.
yes, not the OG one. The most recent one is a hybrid, and it kicks butt. It
Yeah.
is one of few cars, like when the more modern Mustangs came out, that was one of the few cars that at the time that made all the change roll out of my pocket, and that made me laugh,
Hmm.
under acceleration. The Acura NSX, when I drove that, the first time I launched that, I laughed out loud. It was just hilarious how fast and how well and how easy this thing does it, which now is like, most EVs, you get in like
Yeah.
anything and it'll do this. But it was wild when the NSX did
Hmm.
this. I thought it was, I don't know,
How
you
could
could
it
argue,
get better than
yeah,
this?
how could it possibly get better? Well, apparently, some executive at Acura, some VP says a NSX like EV sports car is coming in 27 or 28. And to me, this is, I'm sure you're
The poor
not
man's
cross.
Navara.
Yeah, I'm sure you're not cross shopping a $100,000 or $150,000 car with a $3 million or $2.5 million
Hmm.
car. But it's always been like with Corvette, they always did more with less.
Hmm.
It cost, a half or a third of the price of a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, and it could battle right there.
Hmm.
And the NSX has always been this cult car. It's always done things way better than it should be able to do, a little bit
Hmm.
more refined,
Hmm.
kind of awesome. And if
Hmm.
they go and they take that and even if they just took the modern one and they just made it an
Hmm.
EV, it would be you'd be within tenths of a second in acceleration to the Navara.
Possibly.
And
Yeah.
and they could, I mean, what competition is there in that arena of the like supercar EV?
I'm
Very
I
few.
mean, there's some concepts, but I mean,
Yeah.
nothing on the market right now.
So I don't think it would be hard for Acura to come out with this NSX and then go, oh, and
Hmm.
hey, look, Ferrari hasn't done it yet, and Lamborghini hasn't done it yet,
Hmm.
and the only other competition is the Nevera, and you can buy whatever 20 of ours for the price of that, or
Yeah.
whatever uh,
Yeah, no, I think it's cool. I will say this though. I think by 27 or 28, there will be some competitive products on the market, probably. I think that's the timeline I heard for the Ferrari EV, the full Lamborghini EV, and potentially an electric Corvette, which we're already kind of halfway there with the E-Ray. But supposedly they are working on a fully EV Corvette. So, um, yeah,
you
but I mean, it's as strange as it sounds, that field could be a little more crowded by then. But yeah, I'd love to see it.
it'd be
So,
super nice if that was a crowded field.
yeah. Well, I wonder, we've talked and I've blogged and you've lent your perspective being a person who tows fairly often, whether for, I guess, what would be your work or for leisure,
For both. Yeah.
for both. Um, so maybe EV trucks, maybe we shouldn't be throwing in the towel on EV trucks so soon, because evidently Hyundai is looking at that segment pretty closely. Um, so there's a report that they have actually gotten a hold of a Cybertruck and are doing a tear down reverse engineering on it in Korea. Um, and some people are speculating they're looking at launching an EV, full size EV truck in the North American market. So, what are your thoughts about this?
I think every manufacturer will have torn down a Cybertruck at this point. And if they haven't torn it down themselves, they've paid Sandy Munro for Munro and Associates' report on a
Hmm.
teardown of this vehicle. They all need to look at this, even if they're not going to make a truck. They
Hmm.
all need to look at, when it comes to electric vehicles, they need to look at all of the electric vehicles from the leader in the industry, and that is definitively Tesla. It's not you're doing a heck of a job, Mary, from GM, despite what Biden said.
Yeah,
It is Tesla.
yeah.
So they come out with the Cybertruck, and as this will be controversial, as bad as the Cybertruck is, because there's so many reports of problems with this thing,
Hmm.
as bad as it is still wildly successful and something that needs to be studied from and learned from.
Hmm.
Because people are buying these things up despite the accelerator pedal falling off,
Hmm.
despite suspension components failing, despite water leaking into the back.
Despite being cut on the vendors.
Yeah, yeah, but despite it chopping your fingers off, all of this stuff. Some of them are legit, some of the complaints are not legit. It has had more problems than probably other Teslas, but it's also
Hmm.
undergone more stupid testing by
Yeah,
internet influencers than other Teslas. I don't
yeah.
remember when the Model X came out. I don't remember people sticking their head in the Falcon Wing doors and having it close on them. Like, where were those stupid
Yeah.
tests? But I finally did see a test of, I can't remember what vehicle it was, but it was like the automatic trunk closing, like pinched my finger on some other vehicle. And I was like, yeah, they'll do that. Like it,
I believe I don't know if it's the same one you're thinking of, but it was the Chevy Silverado EV. And it was
yeah,
like some sales guy like showing it off. Oh, watch this. And it's still crunched down on his fingers. He's like, oh crap. Oh.
yeah. These things don't, it's like you don't walk into a street without looking. Uh,
Yeah.
it's basic things in life. Don't put your hands in something that's closing. Like, don't trust the thing.
I don't know if you remember this a couple of years back. This was when the whole some of these safety features were kind of new, but I guess Volvo had come out with the automatic emergency braking system. And there was a demo at some Volvo dealership. I can't remember if it was the US or Europe or China or whatever. This guy standing in the road and told the guy driving, "Yeah, just come straight at me. Don't Don't hit the brakes, don't do anything.
What could go
And
wrong?
boom, it just hit the guy head on. I mean, I think the guy was only going like 15 miles an hour, so it wasn't the end of the world, but still.
There was a test. This is called getting off topic. There was a saw that had a detector for human skin. And so it
Uh,
was like a circular saw, like table saw.
yeah.
And if it detected contact with human skin, the blade would drop and it would like break part of the system. So you had to replace like the blade or whatever it was. It was,
Uh-huh.
it was a destructive kind of thing, but it would save your finger. And when I saw this get demonstrated, I never saw it get demonstrated with a finger that used a hot dog because you're an idiot. Even if you believe that this will work, you are a complete idiot who doesn't deserve the job to test this with your actual finger. Some things you find
So
something
the
else
front
to
pinch
test.
test, he should have used a hot dog.
You use a hot dog. You use something else. You don't use your hand, your fingers, whatever. All right. So
Anyway,
yes. So I don't know.
I don't know.
Hyundai, who would have said that Hyundai was going to come up with a like a mini truck, and they did. And I see
Yeah,
tons of them.
Santa Cruz, and also the Kia Tasman in the Australian market. That's a legit mid-sized truck they're making for that market. So I don't know how this all ties together, but we'll keep an eye on the space. So speaking of the Cybertruck, and we had this conversation about, is GM's approach right or wrong with this like 3,000 pound, 200 plus kilowatt hour battery pack? But it's paid off from the standpoint of, even while towing, that truck can do like 200 legit miles with a pretty sizable load.
Yeah, it's actually
Um,
useful.
yeah. I mean, despite weighing 9,000 pounds, but
Yeah.
that's beside the point. So this is one area where the actual production Cybertruck has come up quite a bit short of the initial promises. Remember, said, "Oh, 500-mile range and this and da."
That was the problem. It went through. They allowed Elon Musk to announce the Cybertruck. That was the first problem because he started throwing. I'm sure that somewhere on the wall he had this list, and all the engineers
And their
were
moonshot
like, "Yeah, they're
list,
all
you know.
moonshot stuff," and all the
Yeah,
engineers are like, "Yeah, we can never hit it." And then he stands on stage and announces this thing's going to be able to
and they're
do
like, "Oh
500
crap."
miles and tow 14,000 pounds, and there was no way it was ever going to be able to do that
Yeah,
unless it weighed 10,000 pounds.
yeah,
And so it doesn't weigh 9 or 10,000 pounds, so it cannot do any of that. So they came up with the other solution, which is the range extender battery pack. Have
yeah.
they actually released anything?
They've released some information on it. Pricing for one thing, it's going to be $16,000, and I guess will require a $500 non-refundable deposit to order, and it must be installed by an authorized service center.
Because the thing
So
weighs like a literal ton.
the add-on pack, I'm sure by itself is easily, at a minimum, I would say probably 700 or 800
Yeah,
pounds.
it's a lot. It's not a
Yeah,
literal ton, but it's a lot.
it's close. Yeah. Um, so anyway, and this got me to thinking, it's like, if they just would have maybe done a little bit better engineering, could they have, and worked on like efficiency and that stuff a little more, could they have made it so, I mean, maybe not the full 500 miles with,
Even this doesn't take it to the 500 miles.
yeah.
On you include a link that'll be in the show notes, Car and Driver, and there they say the truck's range to more than 450 miles. So even with this, it doesn't
Mhm.
get it to what Elon
So
said.
even with the add-on, it's going to it's essentially going to match what the Silverado EV can do.
And this makes so the Cybertruck bed
Hmm.
isn't as big as it is advertised because
Because it's angled. Yeah.
it's well, and the tonneau cover, the whatever the battalion top or whatever, it's got some silly name, that it rolls up and it's got a store somewhere. It loops
Hmm.
around. I've had a work truck a Tundra where we installed one of these on
Hmm.
it, and you gave up a solid foot to foot and a half of the bed because it
Hmm.
has to roll up somewhere. It's the same
Hmm.
thing with the Cybertruck. It looks neater in the Cybertruck, but it's the base of the bed of the truck is the
Hmm.
full length that they advertise.
Hmm.
But if you go up 3 inches, you've lost like 3 or 4 or 5 inches of the bed. If you go up like a
Hmm.
foot, you've lost like a foot or so of the bed because
So you
this
have to make room for
angles
the
up
roll-up
because
mechanism. Yeah.
the whole thing rolls. So this then goes and clicks in over all of that. Now you've gone from, what was their bed? It was probably 5.5 foot bed or something. I don't even
Or
remember
it's
what it
like
was.
it was six something, but
Even if it was 6.5 feet, the same length as my Super Duty truck, even if it was that, this is going to be taking up at least 2 feet of that.
yeah. So you're going to be
And
left with a
payload.
bed probably smaller than a Ford Maverick. So
Yeah. You're left with best case scenario of 5 foot bed.
not
Best
even that. I
case.
would say like four or something,
Yeah, I
if
would
that.
guess 4.5 foot.
Yeah,
And you've lost your payload
yeah.
because you got a big battery pack in there. So now you put your groceries in there. Like, this is just, it's a fail in every
Yeah.
sense. This was, this was Elon Musk getting over exuberant at the beginning, saying 500
And
miles,
over promising.
over
Yeah.
promising. Then they couldn't deliver it. So then they come up
Yeah.
with this solution, which is not a solution.
Yeah.
It's
So
just not.
I will say this. I know a lot of people have criticized GM for the weight of the Silverado EV, the Hummer EV, now the Sierra. I think the Sierra version just came out, for being 9,000 plus pounds. But, you know, whether or not from an engineering standpoint, it's elegant or it's efficient or whatever, even with that, like, you know, pavement crumbling weight, they made it work. Like you said, they brute forced it. They have a big usable battery pack that gives you an actual usable range while towing, and with the mid gate up to 11 feet of cargo length. Um, I mean, taking away just the massive weight, I would say like the Silverado and Sierra EVs. I mean, right now, I think that's kind of the hero of the EV truck market, I think. But
The
yeah,
Cybertruck's cool. I've been seeing the Silverado
hmm
EVs on the road. They're blah. But
yeah, but you've been
so's my
seeing
F-250.
well, yeah, but you've been seeing the WTs, the work trucks, not the
Yes.
RSTs
Yeah.
with all the bells and whistles on them. Yeah,
But at the end of the day, my F-250 is blah, and it can do everything that I need a
it
truck
gets
to
the
do.
job done. Yeah,
And that, I'm not buying these for style. If you're buying a Cybertruck for style, you're probably not also towing with it and doing a bunch of other stuff. If you are doing all that other stuff, it's a compromise. And you are choosing that
hmm
compromise probably for marketing purposes, because you can market your company on this cool, you can put a wrap on it and you could be
hmm
cool. And it's a marketing exercise
it's
and
definitely
marketing
eye catching.
expense.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I've got nothing wrong with that. But it is not a truck that I need. If you're looking for a style kind of truck, I don't know, I'd buy a Rivian.
yeah. Well, there is actually a cheaper alternative if you want to extend the range on your Cybertruck. Um, and I
I,
guess Tesla figured this out.
I'm
So,
I'm surprised that this took engineers, because they could have just called me and I could have told them this.
so this is off the Autopian. I guess Tesla's now offering more, I guess, more street-oriented tires. That I guess they're claiming results in a 22-mile range edition, just I guess through less rolling resistance. So if you're not going to go rock crawling and mud bogging, maybe get the street tires.
Years ago, when I bought my Kia, little Optima,
Hmm
Kia eventually got handed a class action lawsuit because it didn't meet the EPA advertised like 32 miles per gallon freeway.
hmm
And the reality was it was like 30, something like that.
hmm
Well, I replaced the tires at one point, and that was it. That jived with what I was getting.
hmm
I was getting the problematic number. I wasn't getting the advertised number. So there was a
Yeah.
class action lawsuit, yada yada yada. Years later, I replaced my tires. I got high efficiency tires. I get more than the EPA advertised range rating
hmm
purely from the tire change on a vehicle that's already very efficient.
hmm
So tires make a huge difference. On my F-250, to talk about that, I went to
hmm
more knobby tires on my last tire change, and I lost about 1.5 miles per gallon on something
So
that I'm
you
already
went from
getting
bad to
nine.
horrible,
Oh
or
yeah, no, it went to really bad. On some trips where I was getting 9, I'm now getting like just under 8. It's like
hmm
miles per gallon. It's bad. Tires though, huge. If you want the biggest bang for the buck in performance, pay for different tires, whether it's fuel economy, whether it's acceleration, like Rimac is discovering. Tires are your number one modification that will make the biggest difference.
And proper inflation. That's another big factor too.
Well, if you're just going for efficiency, which is how I do it on my Kia, is you overinflate.
Yeah.
It's the least.
Never mind about safety. It's all about more MPGs,
yeah,
right?
you can't really stop, and the rain performance is awful. But in a straight line on the freeway, you get really good fuel economy.
Yeah.
So tell me, what's on fire now?
Oh, so if you hadn't seen, I guess Cybertruck, or excuse me, not the Cybertruck, the Tesla Semi is so hot, it is literally on fire. And as of 2 days ago, it shut down I-80 in Northern California in both directions.
This was a semi, because I've not heard of this. What? This is a semi?
A Tesla Semi.
Caught on fire.
Owned by Tesla, evidently. That now the exact cause is unknown. They haven't released or determined whether it was a collision or just kind of spontaneously started catching fire or smoking or whatever. But this was, I mean, when it was first reported, I checked the day after a news update, and after the initial report, a day later, it was still burning.
This is where EVs are awesome.
Yeah. So, and the report, I guess the fire, the chief or the commanding, firefighter on the scene said they had put literally thousands and thousands of gallons on it, and it was still going.
If this was a Tesla test vehicle, how was Tesla not able to deploy somebody with something that was designed to put out an EV fire?
Like a big foam cannon or something?
Or the blanket or something.
That would be a big blanket.
This wouldn't
cover
this
the semi.
This is not like the first time. This is not, so you can get these, I forget what they call them, but they're emergency sheets on how to deal with all of these things. And manufacturers put them out. Tesla has a sheet on this that goes to fire departments that you can download off the Tesla website. It exists. I have seen it. I have downloaded it.
Yeah, emergency response. Yeah.
Yeah, if Tesla is out testing something like the Semi with, what is it? I mean, I don't even remember. I'm going to say 500 kilowatt hour battery.
At least 500 to 800, depending on the configuration, I think.
If you're out testing that, you have got to be prepared for something to go wrong. If it is a test mule, I mean, if they're selling millions, whatever, it's already been tested. But if they are just testing it, they've got to be prepared for something to happen. And how can they not? How can they be leaving the fire department to just be throwing water on those things for days? There's got to be a better way.
Yeah. Anyway, we may update this next week. But yeah, it says the crash is still under investigation. So
it looks like a mountainous area. I'm watching the news report now. It looks like a mountainous area that they were in. So it could have been going up hills and really generating a lot of heat. And
yeah, but supposedly it was unloaded, which is kind of interesting though. So
yeah, there was. I mean, and the thing burned like to the ground. It's crazy. There'll be a link in the show notes. It's like there's no cab. And there's only like most of a chassis that you can identify.
Yeah.
That was hot.
That was hot. I can tell you what else was hot, evidently, is so Tesla's not alone in having these battery issues. So a Mercedes-Benz EV caught fire in South Korea and caused pretty extensive damage, evidently. So this was an underground parking garage and like an apartment tower, and supposedly 140 vehicles in this parking garage were damaged. It said it took 8 hours to extinguish the fire, and this made a big enough scene in the local news coverage that I guess the Korean Transport Ministry called a meeting with representatives of Mercedes-Benz Korea, Volkswagen Group, and the Hyundai Motor Group to discuss, I guess, potential safety measures going forward.
And so, now carry on.
Yeah. So
I'll interrupt you later.
So I guess what this came down to is they're saying, where did these batteries originate? Who built these? Because this is the thing is with a lot of these EVs, they have multiple sources for these batteries depending on who can meet the demand. So they'll kind of outsource or kind of source in like, oh, well, so and so has their pack. We'll just put those packs in. So that I guess Korea is considering requiring mandatory disclosure in terms of the manufacturers of the battery packs. So
Almost like an EV passport, like they're doing in Europe, where everything's
yeah,
tracked. It's
yeah.
almost like that's going to become a world requirement. I am glad. I thought you were going to go a different way with this.
Oh.
This seems like a very reasonable response to this.
Mhm.
So the
Instead
problem
of
with
ban all EVs.
yeah, the knee-jerk reaction is, oh, look at this. Well, you know what? Cars catch on fire in parking lots all the time. Like, stuff happens.
Hmm.
The problem with EVs is that, like in the case of this, it burns for 8 hours instead of an hour or two or whatever. And,
Hmm.
it's easy to extinguish a gasoline fire.
Hmm.
It's not so easy, depending on what it is, to
Hmm.
extinguish an EV fire. If it's like, a short underneath the dashboard and that caught the carpet on fire, that's just your standard fire and
Hmm.
that could be put
But
out.
if it's the
But
high voltage battery, that's a whole other.
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's all of these like, oh, we got to ban EVs. This is why EVs are death traps. And it's like, yeah, okay. You know how many episodes of Chips I watched as a kid where one car flipped over and the next thing you know is like mushroom cloud
Fireballs.
explosion?
Yeah.
Yeah. Gasoline is not much better when it comes to safety of these
Hmm.
things. But I like that they're researching whether or not this is a larger issue
Hmm.
based on manufacturer of the battery. We need to get to the bottom of this because we are early days in
Hmm.
this whole technology.
Yeah.
And there's a rush to market going on.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of people, I think, just trying stuff out. Like, I mean, as we learned with GM,
Hmm.
they had the Bolt and it caught on fire and they were like, oh, we fixed it. And then it caught on fire. And they were like, oh, we fixed it. And then it caught on fire. And you're like, do you guys know actually what you're doing? Do you,
Yeah.
can you fix this?
Which they finally did.
They did,
Anyway,
yes.
um, so what's interesting is, I guess, just a couple days after that story broke, Hyundai said, "Hey, guess what, guys? We're working on a battery management system that will send you text alerts if we detect an issue with your battery pack."
Bing, bing,
So,
your car's
so I'm
on
like,
fire.
coincidence? I don't know, but
I, yeah, I don't, I guess that's good. I mean, what do you do then?
schedule
Notify the
service or like park it outside, or I mean, I don't
as
know.
long as it's seeing things early enough,
Yeah.
not just like I said, ding ding, oh, let me check my phone. Oh, your car's on fire. Uh, then that's a
Yeah.
little too late. If it can detect, there's something with the anode or the cathode or whatever side it is that's the problem on these things.
Hmm.
If it can detect early signs of whatever that is,
Hmm.
then that's great. But if it can't detect it super early,
Hmm.
I don't really know
Yeah.
what use it is.
Well, so anyway, at least it shows they're kind of looking into like proactive kind of action and management of some of these issues. So that's
We'll look
good.
we'll look back on this in time, and these right now, this is like the dark
Yeah.
ages in technology when it comes to
Yeah.
EVs. It's not as bad as 2010, but we're learning and we're moving
Still
so
early days.
fast. It's
Yeah.
very early days, and all of this will be resolved. And you'll look back in 15, 20 years and be like, what idiots. Why aren't they doing this? It's just because we
Yeah.
didn't know, and you've got to fail to learn. And
Yep.
that's exactly what's happening here. So this is a nice measured response, and I like it.
Yeah.
A nice measured response as well to the GTI would be to make an EV version that goes like a bat out of hell.
Yeah. I'm all about it. I'm a former GTI owner. You had a not exactly the same, but you had a Scirocco.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I had many complaints about my GTI, but it not being fun to drive was not one of them. It was one of the most fun to drive vehicles I've ever owned, but it had its share of issues. But I'm willing to kind of get over that and maybe give VW another chance. But so yeah, I'd be excited to see a GTI EV.
So
So
this was on autocar.co.uk, and this was VW
mhm.
Technical Development Chief. You say the name.
Kai Grunitz.
There you go. He said that the GTI EV will be, quote, will be a, quote, real go-kart to drive. Great. That's what we want.
Yeah.
I was listening to an interview with RJ Scaringe on Motor Trend's
Hmm.
uh, inevitable.
inevitable. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was talking about the R3,
Hmm.
potentially your next car. And he was saying the quad motor version of that is going to be like supercar performance.
There's going to be a quad motor. I thought the tri motor was
Oh
going
no,
to be
sorry,
the.
sorry, tri-motor. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I was like, wow.
Yeah, no, no, no. The quad motor would be crazy, but the tri motor for
R3X. Yeah.
will be for people that are they're like, well, let's cross shop. Let's go back to the beginning, an NSX,
Yeah.
or should I get this? It's got four doors, the same acceleration, and it's got these other refinements, whatever, that the
Hmm.
supercar doesn't necessarily have. And he said, this would be a game changer, and that this is a really cool. It's like a hatchback. There's not really anything like it. And the GTI, I think, is something that is kind of like it, as much as RJ wouldn't say in this
Hmm.
interview that there was other benchmarks for vehicles that they looked at. The
Yeah.
GTI was definitely one of those benchmarks.
Yeah.
And so I think we are in, much like in the gasoline world for the late teens, I guess, 20 teens, we were kind of in a golden era, and the early 2020s, a golden
Hmm.
era of gas. We were peak performance when it came to
Hmm.
ICE vehicles. We were having 1,000 horsepower, street driven, four-door family sedans
Hmm.
and SUVs, stuff that the likes of which we've never seen before, acceleration that was
Yeah.
ungodly.
Hmm.
And I think that we are about to hit in the next, say, I don't know, 7 years or so, we will
Hmm.
probably be in that
Peak
golden
EVs.
peak enthusiast EV for a while anyway.
Yeah.
There'll
Yeah.
be something else, but I think we're going to start seeing the hot hatches, things like that also do 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds,
I'm all for it.
and maybe even be affordable, maybe. Uh,
So this last point, so this is you can give yourself a pat on the back, Phil, because I think this is something you kind of called, and I was like, oh, maybe we'll see. Uh, so Tesla's long rumored low cost vehicle,
the $25,000 EV.
yeah. We might have gotten a kind of a sneak peek of what that might be. So I guess for the Mexico market, Tesla is now offering a cloth interior variant of the Model 3 that also removes the heated steering wheel and the rear seat display, which came out with the Highland, the Model 3 refresh. So this basically goes back to the pre-Highland Model 3 like content level with cloth seats. Um, so is this the low cost Tesla?
And this is what I've been saying is I don't think Tesla, I mean, the $25,000 EV is never going to be, because
Hmm.
inflation
Yeah.
and time. And like, we've been looking for this $25,000 EV for like 7 or 8 years. A lot has
Hmm.
changed in that amount of time. But I don't think Tesla needs to, and this is what I was saying before, that Tesla doesn't need to design a $25,000 EV. The $25,000 EV, quote unquote $25,000, is going to come to them.
Hmm.
And they redesign, eventually, if they redesign the Model 3, they do the iPhone method and they keep the old one around. And
They
you
call it the
sell,
S or whatever.
yeah, you sell a cheaper version of, they release a new Model 3, and this is Model 3 Classic or S or whatever
Hmm.
whatever you want to call it. You decontent it a little bit, but you've just got all the efficiencies that have been created in manufacturing for this one specific thing. And then here you throw some
Hmm.
cloth seats on it, you take the heated steering wheel out, you take the screen out, you take it, drop a couple features, and the next thing you know, you're at that, quote unquote $25,000 EV, which is actually $30,000 now, because you
Hmm.
can't get anything for $25,000.
Yeah.
But you are driving your $40,000 Model 3 is
Trendsetter.
the $25,000 EV that I mean, that it truly is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yours will be the $25,000 quote unquote EV. Your SR plus.
Yeah.
That's where it's going to end up. Is
I'm not mad. I mean, honestly, if a cloth interior option was available when I bought mine, I probably would have gotten it.
Oh, I much prefer cloth. I've got a vehicle that's got leather or leatherette, whatever,
Yeah.
and cloth. And man, cruising around, not to this will be what, the third reference to my F-250. It's an older one, so the
Yeah.
seats are cloth and it's like the
Yeah.
90s
Yeah.
seats. It's like sitting on your couch and going for a drive. You
Yeah.
can drive for 8 to 10 hours in that thing, and it's just like sitting and watching TV all day in your house. It's so
Yeah.
awesome. That cloth can be so much better. Then my other vehicle has got leather. You get in that, and if it's a warm day, it's like
And you're like, ugh.
sticky. Yeah, it's easier to clean, but that's about all it's got going for it. I've never been a fan
Yeah.
of leather.
Anyway, so if you're a fan of the Watt car,
Which
go
I am.
to good. Well, you can go to thewattcar.com/store. And as Phil alluded to in the introduction, get a backpack.
Yeah, you could get a backpack. You could also, and I always say, support the podcast, support the blog by purchasing a t-shirt. But it's not all logos stuff. You can get logo stuff, but we also have a variety of other shirts. One of my favorites is EV displacement replacement. Then we've got EVAF. We've got Wake Up to a Full Charge. We've got Hydrogen is Future and
I've
Always
got an
Will
adapter
Be.
for that.
I've got an adapter for that. We've got all of these things up there. Water bottle, and now, as Ed said, the backpack. It helps support the podcast and the blog. This isn't free to do. We do it about as efficiently as you can, but it still costs money, so anything is appreciated. We do little ads on the website that basically nearly covers the cost of the website.
And if you're watching us on the YouTube, like and subscribe.
Oh yeah, I guess you could do that. I don't even know how any of that works. It's just magic, isn't it?
We should ask Mr. Beast, or maybe not. I don't
know. Right now, you don't ask him. What else do we have going on? We have all the show notes are embedded into the podcast. I think I covered that earlier. Email us at hello@thewattcar.com. And who should the wattcar.com/advertise? Who should the deal of the week go to? Is it Tesla, and we can help them turn around their battery burning?
Or
problems?
Volkswagen if they want to promo the GTI EV.
Oh yeah, we can help with that. Let's go with that one instead. That's far more positive and uplifting. We'll be back next week with more stuff. We're getting to an interesting time of the year where we may be getting some more interviews. I don't know. Hopefully in the coming weeks. So
stay tuned.
We'll see how that goes. Talk to you in a week.
All right.